You think those ballet shoes are gonna help you climb a rope wall, sweetheart? Commander Rourke's voice slashed through the fog rolling in off the Pacific. He stood like a sentinel on the edge of the SEAL obstacle course, his arms crossed over a perfectly pressed uniform, his expression twisted in smug amusement. His gaze was locked on a lone figure, a girl no older than 9, standing at the edge of the mud-soaked training field in a pink hoodie and oversized combat boots. She didn't flinch. She didn't laugh or look away. She just stared ahead, at the towering rope structure as if it were a riddle she had already solved in her head. The wind tugged at her sketchpad, tucked under one arm. It was frayed at the edges, pages curled, worn by time and something harder to name, maybe grief, maybe memory. Her name was Aisha Bennett, and though her hands were small and unclasped, and though her hand was tied back in a loose girlish ponytail, there was nothing uncertain in her posture. From the second she stepped onto Naval Base Daggerfall, she hadn't blinked. 2 hours earlier, Aisha had been in the back seat of her mother's battered Toyota Camry, humming softly to herself. As the wheels rolled past the towering gates, naval personnel moved in organized lines, their bodies carved by years of discipline, their eyes forward like laser sights. She watched them with fascination, not for their power, but for their focus, their silence, their purpose. "Daniel, keep an eye on your sister," Dr. Lena Bennett said as she parked outside the Behavioral Services wing. Her voice was clipped, rushed, a tone of a woman who'd learned to juggle grief and deadlines without dropping either. "I'll only be an hour." Daniel, 14 and full of bored resentment, barely looked up from his phone. Yeah, got it. "You listen to your brother," Lena said, crouching to Aisha's level, smoothing the crease on her hoodie. "This is a military base. No wandering." "I know, Mama," Aisha whispered. "I just want to draw." Lena paused, her fingers brushing Aisha's cheek with a tenderness sharpened by guilt. The girl's eyes wide, dark, knowing far too much, reminded her of Marcus, her late husband, Aisha's father, a Navy SEAL who never made it home from a raid outside Kabul. "I'll be back soon," Lena said, and then she was gone, swallowed by steel doors and bureaucratic procedures. For the first few minutes, Aisha stayed where she was supposed to. She sketched the silhouettes of soldiers from the waiting room window, their postures, the angles of their rifles, the slant of their caps. But then a loud voice echoed from somewhere beyond the walls, a shout, a barked order, a burst of laughter. Then came the metallic clang of boots on scaffolding, and the sound, faint but unmistakable, of someone hitting the mud hard. Her eyes narrowed. Outside, the fog was lifting just enough to reveal the edge of the training course. She looked at Daniel. He had earbuds in, completely absorbed in whatever game or video he'd disappeared into. She slipped past the reception desk, past a distracted corpsman on his phone, past 2 vending machines humming like broken radios. She walked with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to be told where she was going, only trusted to find it. The obstacle course opened before her like a movie set. Rope walls, trench crawls, monkey ladders and swinging platforms, all framed by the jagged coastline behind it. A group of SEAL candidates were panting, mud-soaked, yelling at each other through gritted teeth. None of them noticed the child standing just beyond the white safety tape. Commander Rourke did. He didn't know who she was, only that she didn't belong, that she was small, out of place, and far too calm. He approached, boots stomping the wet gravel with intent. "You lost, ballerina." Aisha turned slowly to face him. "No, sir." Her voice was soft but steady. No fear, no sass, just calm defiance. Rourke raised an eyebrow. "You know what this is? A SEAL obstacle course? Phase 1 prep." She didn't smile when she said it. She stated it like a soldier reciting a checklist. "You read that on a pamphlet." "My brother did this course last summer," she said. "He timed out halfway through. I helped him train in the garage after the candidates nearby started watching." Now, one of them, Petty Officer Ramirez, let out a low whistle. "You're serious?" Rourke said. Aisha nodded. "I want to try." The commander scoffed. "You can't be serious." "I am." He let out a laugh, loud and sharp. "You think this is a game? You think those tiny arms are gonna pull you over a 12-foot wall? You'll fall and crack your head open." "I won't fall. I've seen grown men break their legs on this course." Then they weren't paying attention. A murmur of amusement swept through the candidates. Ramirez looked over at Rourke and said, "Sir, let her try. She'll get hurt. Put her on the first 3 obstacles. We'll keep eyes on her." Rourke stared down at Aisha. Her boots were caked in mud, too big for her feet. Her hair was damp from fog, but her gaze didn't flinch. And somewhere, beneath all his bravado, the commander felt something twist in his gut. "All right," he said finally. "Phase 1, you get one try." Aisha handed her sketchpad to Ramirez, tightened the drawstrings on her hoodie, and stepped toward the line from across the course. A whistle blew. The stopwatch began, and Aisha moved. She didn't leap or charge. She moved like she'd been there before, like every rung, every rope, every stretch of soaked earth had been etched into her bones. The candidates leaned forward, Rourke narrowed. His eyes, she reached the base of the rope wall and leaped, and just as her fingers touched the first rung, the wind shifted, carrying with it the voice of a woman calling from the main building. Aisha. She didn't stop. She climbed. Mud caked her palms, rope fibers bit into her fingers, but Aisha didn't hesitate. She climbed like she'd done it 1,000 times, not fast, not flashy, just precise. One hand over the other, knees bent just enough to push upward, arms steady even as the rope swayed under her light weight. The 12-foot wall loomed like a colossus, but she treated it like an old friend. Commander Rourke stood motionless at the base, arms folded, jaw clenched. Every instinct in him screamed that this was a mistake, a liability, a child on a grown man's course. Yet he couldn't look away, not because he expected her to fall, but because she hadn't yet. Lieutenant Harper, clipboard in hand, muttered under his breath, "She's actually doing it." Petty Officer Ramirez whispered back, "And she hasn't even slipped once." At the top of the wall, Aisha paused. She wasn't out of breath. Her face was flushed, but calm. She swung one leg over the beam with awkward grace, like a dancer remembering a forgotten step, and then began her descent. The crowd, mostly SEAL candidates and a few instructors who had wandered in to see the scene, fell completely silent. Her boots landed softly in the mud. She stood upright, dusted her knees, and moved to the next obstacle. Monkey bars, 24 rungs of steel, slick with coastal dew. Candidates twice her size had failed here just this morning. One had dislocated his shoulder trying to swing too far too fast. Aisha didn't rush. She studied the frame, noticed where the handprints had worn away moisture. She adjusted her grip and reached for the first bar. Behind her, someone exhaled. "She's going to fall. No way, she has the wingspan." But then she moved a smooth, pendulum rhythm, not fast, not reckless. She swung hand to hand, keeping her body tight and legs tucked like a gymnast. When her palm slipped briefly on the 15th rung, she rebalanced with a quiet breath and a twitch of her wrist, like she'd anticipated the mistake by the 24th bar. The spectators were holding their breath, and when her boots hit the ground, the silence broke into hushed murmurs. Commander Rourke's face was unreadable. His mind screamed for an explanation. A trick, a lucky fluke, something, but she wasn't even sweating. The trench crawl was next. 40 feet of slick mud, tangled wires above, sharp gravel below. It was designed to scrape skin, test patience, induce claustrophobia. Grown men had panicked in that tight, wet space. Aisha dropped flat and pulled herself forward without pause. Each movement was deliberate. Elbows drove, toes pushed. Her eyes remained forward, focused on the narrow light at the end of the trench. The mud clung to her hoodie, smeared her cheeks, stained her sketchpad, still tucked in Ramirez's hands, but she never once looked back. Daniel stood near the edge of the crowd now, finally pulled from his screen, mouth hanging open. That's my sister," he whispered, unsure if it was pride or disbelief thickening his throat. Lena Bennett had just stepped out of the Behavioral Services wing when a passing petty officer said, "Ma'am, I think you need to see this." She followed the crowd. What she saw stopped her cold. Her daughter, the same child she tucked in at night with whispered stories and promises of safety, was crawling through mud beneath combat wires, eyes locked forward like a soldier on a mission. Her heart seized, but she didn't scream, not yet at the end of the trench. Aisha rose slowly. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. She looked ahead to the final challenge, the tire drag, 100-pound rubber tire attached to a thick rope. It was 3 times her weight. Everyone waited for her to turn away. She didn't. She walked to the rope, crouched and gripped it with both hands. Her fingers, raw from rope burn, closed tight, her legs braced. She leaned back. The tire didn't move. She adjusted her footing, tried again. Nothing. Then she closed her eyes, lips moving silently, just 3 words. For you, Dad. The rope jerked. Breath. Another pull. And the tire inched forward. The strain showed on her face now, her teeth clenched, arms trembling. A soft grunt escaped her lips, her boots dug furrows in the mud. Inch by inch, the tire moved behind her like a shadow, unwilling to be left behind. The crowd watched in total silence. No cheers, no jokes, only AW. Commander Rourke took a step forward. Then another. Something in his chest twisted. Not anger, not shame, but the slow-burning awareness of being wrong. Deeply, irrevocably wrong. Aisha crossed the line. The stopwatch clicked. She let go of the rope and dropped to her knees. Ramirez rushed forward with a towel. Harper called out the time. 2 minutes, 48 seconds. No one responded. Then he said it again. That's faster than 3 of our trainees today. Rourke looked at the little girl kneeling in the mud. Her hoodie soaked, her cheeks streaked with grit and tears. She looked up at him, and smiled. It wasn't smug. It wasn't mocking, it was calm. I finished, she said softly, before anyone could speak. A voice called out, sharp, terrified, Aisha. Lena pushed through the crowd, her heels slipping in the mud. She dropped beside her daughter, pulling her close, touching her face as if to confirm she was real. What are you doing? Are you hurt? Aisha leaned into her mother's arms, too tired to answer. Then Daniel stepped forward, holding the stopwatch Harper had handed him. She beat half the guys here, he said, his voice quiet, proud. Lena stared at the numbers, her breath caught. Behind them Rourke turned away, his shoulders stiff but his voice quieter now. Who is she? Ramirez answered without hesitation. Aisha Bennett, daughter of Lieutenant Marcus Bennett KIA Kabul 2 years ago. The silence that followed wasn't shocked, it was respect, earned. Aisha sat on the edge of the field, legs tucked under her, her mud-soaked hoodie clinging to her frame. In her lap, Ramirez had placed the sketchpad she'd left behind. The pencil in her hand trembled slightly, but her strokes were steady. The curve of a rope wall, the arch of monkey bars, the hulking tire she'd dragged like a soldier pulling a wounded comrade through fire. Around her the base had changed. Conversations were quieter now. Eyes that once dismissed her now held something closer to awe. Commander Rourke stood across the field, arms slack at his sides, staring not at her, but at the course, like he needed to see it again to believe what had just happened. Lieutenant Harper approached slowly, clipboard forgotten under his arm. She shouldn't have been able to do that, he said to no one in particular. She's what? 9, Lena replied, still crouched beside her daughter, arms wrapped around Aisha's shoulders like a second skin. She just turned 9 last week. Harper blinked. That time she clocked. That's active candidate material. Some of our adult recruits don't even finish. Lena didn't answer. She wasn't here for records. Her eyes were locked on Aisha's face, mud-streaked, exhausted, and calm in a way that frightened her more than anything else. Not because it suggested toughness, but because it suggested she'd been here before, in this space of pressure and pain. That kind of calm was earned, not given. Commander Rourke finally moved, striding toward them. His shadow fell long across the field as he stopped short of the small circle forming around Aisha. His jaw worked silently for a moment, words forming behind clenched teeth. She shouldn't have been on the course, he said flatly. She wasn't invited. Lena shot back, rising to her feet. But you let her run it. Rourke didn't blink. And now every protocol I've built here is in question. Good, Ramirez muttered, not loud enough to challenge directly, but enough to earn a glance from Harper. She's a child, Rourke continued, voice colder now. Not a symbol, not a prodigy, a child. What if she'd been hurt? What if she froze halfway through and one of the recruits rushed in to help and got injured? There's a reason we separate civilians from operations. But she didn't freeze, Harper said quietly, and she didn't fail. That's not the point. Yes it is, Ramirez said, stepping forward. She outperformed 3 of our adult candidates. With 0 prep. No gear, just grit. That's not nothing. Rourke's lip curled. You want to start measuring SEAL aptitude by childhood trauma and blind luck. Lena flinched. Ramirez clenched his fists, but Aisha reached out and tugged gently on her mother's sleeve. It wasn't luck, she said softly. The conversation stopped. Aisha looked up at Rourke, her expression unreadable. My dad taught me how to watch, how to breathe. He said sometimes you don't get to train before life tests you. Rourke stared at her. That calm voice, that gaze that didn't flinch. You're saying you prepared for this. I'm saying I remembered. The silence was heavier this time, and in that quiet, Harper made a decision. We need to file a report. Lena's head snapped around. Excuse me, not disciplinary, Harper clarified. Recognition. A dependent performed a full SEAL assessment drill under live observation. We can't ignore that. She's not an experiment. She's evidence, Harper said. That maybe our assumptions aren't as bulletproof as we like to think. Across the field, a black SUV approached. The seal of the Department of Defense was visible even through the thick dust on the windshield. Commander Rourke's posture shifted as the vehicle came to a stop. Two men in suits stepped out, one holding a briefcase, the other scanning the crowd. Harper exhaled. They're fast. Lena's stomach dropped. Who are they? Pentagon liaison, probably. Words out. Aisha stood, tucking her sketchpad under her arm like it was a shield. One of the men approached Dr. Bennett. Lena stiffened. Yes, he extended a card. Director Wallace, Psychological Operations Division. Why would PS Ops care about this? He glanced at Aisha. Because she just rewrote what we know about human potential. Lena stepped between them instinctively. She's 9, not a case study. I'm not here to recruit, Wallace said gently. I'm here because your daughter just exposed a blind spot in our training assumptions, and because her father's record still echoes in every hallway at the Pentagon. The name hung there again. Marcus Bennett, the man who never came home, the soldier who taught his daughter to breathe under pressure, to watch patterns, to stay calm when fear surged. Rourke shifted uncomfortably. This doesn't change procedure. Wallace raised an eyebrow. Doesn't it? Harper looked at Aisha, then back at Rourke. She didn't just complete a drill. She did it under observation, with verbal abuse in her ear the entire time. Rourke's jaw tensed. She had a choice, Ramirez added. She could have backed down. No one would have blamed her. She's a child, Rourke snapped. And you underestimated her, Lena said, voice razor sharp. Just like they underestimated Marcus. And he still saved 6 men that night. Everyone fell silent. Aisha looked up at the towering commander, then turned toward the tires again, now sitting like sleeping giants in the mist. I want to go home now, she said. Wallace stepped back. Of course, but I'd like to follow up in the future. There's more to understand here than just speed or strength. Lena nodded stiffly. As they turned to leave, Ramirez handed Aisha her drawing. She smiled softly, then reached up and handed it to him instead. For your wall, she said, so you don't forget what you saw. And then she walked away, boots squelching in the mud. One step at a time, each one a quiet reminder that courage sometimes comes wrapped in pink and soaked in dirt. Behind her, no one moved, not yet. Rain came down in a fine mist over Daggerfall 2 days later, soft enough to blur the outlines of everything: buildings, flags, even the wide-eyed memory of what had happened on the obstacle course. But inside Building 17, lights buzzed, papers moved, and voices sharpened with urgency. A video replayed for the 3rd time on a large wall monitor. A 9-year-old girl in a pink hoodie scaling the 12-foot wall, crawling through the mud, dragging a 100-pound tire. The time stamp in the corner blinked like a metronome. 2:48. Major Helena Granger watched with arms folded, her mouth a thin line. She was the Pentagon's top human performance strategist, and she'd flown in overnight with orders to observe and decide. Across the table sat Commander Rourke, stiff as ever, eyes locked on the floor. I don't need to watch it again, he muttered. Granger didn't look away from the screen. No, you probably don't. But the rest of the department, well, it's already been passed to the Joint Chiefs. I prefer to be briefed before Congress asks why a 9-year-old just embarrassed half your recruits. Rourke's jaw tightened. It wasn't my idea. She wasn't authorized. She wasn't expected. Granger corrected, turning to face him. That's different, and far more interesting. Down the hall, Aisha sat quietly on a bench, outside the behavioral evaluation room. Her sketchpad was balanced on her knees, though she hadn't drawn anything today. Instead, her fingers traced the grooves of the tire drag illustration she'd finished the night before, her small thumb smudging the edge of the pencil marks. The page was beginning to wear thin. Her mother paced nearby, phone in hand, trying to stay composed. Lena had spent most of the last 48 hours fending off reporters, fielding calls from brass she'd never heard of, and saying no to every offer that reeked of spectacle. Book deals, talk shows, sponsorships, The world had decided Aisha was a symbol, now a prodigy, a miracle, the second coming of military legacy wrapped in a child's frame. But to Lena, she was just her daughter. And Lena wasn't interested in anyone else writing her story. The door opened with a soft click. "Mrs. Bennett, we're ready." Lena exhaled, touched Aisha's shoulder. The girl stood silently and walked in beside her mother. Inside her mother. Inside the room was sparse, just a table, 2 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. Granger stood when they entered, her uniform sharp, her gaze sharper. "Aisha," she said, voice measured. "I'm Major Granger. Thank you for coming back." Aisha nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am." Granger motioned for her to sit. "This isn't a test, I'm just here to understand what happened." Aisha looked at her mother, then sat, hands folded. "Okay." Granger glanced down at a file. "Tell me, when did you first start learning about obstacle courses?" "I didn't," Aisha said. "I watched my dad used to train in the garage. I memorized what he did." "And what about on the field that day? Did you feel scared?" A pause, a little, Aisha admitted, but not like freeze-up scared, just focused. Granger scribbled something. "Were you trying to prove something?" Aisha hesitated. "No, I just wanted to see if I could do it. And then Commander Rourke said I couldn't." Granger set her pen down, and that was enough. "No," Aisha said, but it helped. Lena chuckled under her breath despite herself. Granger leaned forward. "Do you know what's happening right now, across the country? Military psychologists are debating whether your brain is wired differently. Biomechanics teams are studying your footage like it's Olympic tape. Some want to put you in simulations. Others think you should enter performance trials." "I just want to draw," Aisha said. The room stilled. Granger studied her. "You don't want to be a SEAL?" Aisha looked up. "Not today." Granger smiled faintly. "Good answer." Downstairs, Rourke stood on the training field alone. The mud had dried slightly, tire tracks frozen in place like relics. He stared at the line Aisha had crossed, the very one he once called sacred. He felt different today, lighter, or maybe just humbled. The kind of humility that stays with a man, that reshapes the way he speaks to the next recruit, the way he listens. He heard footsteps. Ramirez approached, hands in his pockets. "They're sending copies of the footage to West Point and Langley." Rourke nodded. "She changed something," Ramirez added. "You can feel it." Rourke didn't respond for a long time. "Then you think I was too hard on her?" Ramirez considered. "You were honest, but maybe the wrong kind of honest." Rourke gave a dry laugh. "That kid made me question everything I've built." "She didn't tear it down," Ramirez said. "She just walked through it." Back upstairs, Aisha and Lena stepped out of the room. Granger watched them go, then turned to the footage one last time. She paused the video at the moment Aisha looked up at the 12-foot wall count. Deliberate, unshaken. She whispered, "They're not ready for you." Aisha didn't peer it. She was already outside, face turned up toward the clouds, her sketchpad under one arm, her boots leaving small, perfect prints on the sidewalk. She wasn't thinking about medals or headlines, or the men in suits who kept staring like she was something impossible. She was thinking about her dad's voice, his steady instructions, his laugh when she'd finally held her first training rope in the backyard. "You don't have to be strong to start," he'd said. "You just have to start. The strength will come." She reached the gate of the base, paused, and looked back once, not for approval, just to remember it exactly how it looked. Then she turned and kept walking toward home.